Welcome back to the next lesson in the Claude Cowork for Beginners Made Easy course. Now, in this video, we're going to look in more detail at organizing files at scale, right? So rescuing your downloads folder. We've already touched on how to organize files in an earlier video and shown you how Cowork can do that. But in this video, I wanted to go a little bit into more detail so I have a better understanding how Cowork even has that ability, how it goes about it, and go over a few sample prompts that just give you more ideas about how you can apply this skill and ability of Cowork to your own benefit. Keep in mind that this is the result of an analysis by IDC research that basically found that most knowledge workers spend around 2 to 2.5 hours a day searching for information. Now, a lot of that time is often just trying to find the right files in the right folders, right? And imagine if we could save most of that time and put it back into your own hands for more productivity, for, well, less stress at work, and just what it also means in terms of productivity for your organization. So, how can Cowork help us with that? Well, the important thing is Claude Cowork can do what we will call content-aware sorting, right? So it reads the file contents, not just the file names. That's an important mistake that a lot of people make, right? They look at this and they think like, oh, Claude Cowork was just looking at the file names and the file type, and based on that, it made the categorization. But if you remember that you can upload Word files, PDF files, PowerPoint files, spreadsheets, and images into Claude or Claude Cowork, and that it can analyze these files for you, summarize them, or give you feedback on it, then you know Claude has the ability to analyze all of these files. And when you give it a prompt to look at the files in a folder, that's exactly what it does, right? So it looks at the content of all of those files, including images, by the way, right? So it has image recognition. And you could even do that for videos, although keep in mind that this consumes a lot of tokens, but you can even do that for videos. I've done it numerous times, and basically what Claude does is that it plays the video and that it takes a screenshot at least once or twice of the video file. And based on that, it knows like what the content of that video is. And it can even basically sort video files for you that way. Right, so yeah, here's just a few examples, right? If we have report 2024, right, and it looks at the contents, it will see tables, right? So an expense table, it knows, all right, this is on the topic of finance. The finally might help, but if it sees in the content, it's an academic paper, it will know probably this is a reference, right? Okay, that's an image file, that is clear, but it can open the photo and then even look at what's the content of the picture and then categorize it. So you could even just give it 20 pictures and let it categorize them for you based on what it sees on the image. If it's notes, right, the file name might help, but again, it is going to look at the content and then it might know, all right, those are project notes. So, well, before and after, I think we've seen that earlier in the video already, right, where I had my sampled folder and told it to organize them. So you can do many things. You can also let it find duplicates and isolate them so that you can delete them later. You can tell it a way to rename files if you want to. And of course, you could also structure your prompt to tell it to give you the plan about how it would do it, and then wait for your confirmation of your approval to do it. But yes, you can really go from 30 minutes to 30 seconds in terms of time spent. You can also turn that into routines, right? So you could, for example, order your downloads folder weekly by type and project. You could do a monthly routine where you archive stale projects and move old work to an archive. You could do it quarterly, maybe for a full review, reorganize files and delete duplicates. Those are just some of the ideas as to what you can do. And of course, it will depend whether you do that for yourself or maybe for something that's company-based. So here are 3 prompts that invite you to try, right? Or if you want, you can pause the video and look at them in more detail and just analyze the structure of the prompt. But even file organization can have different purposes, right? So you could clean up your downloads folder, say, look at my downloads folder, sort all files into subfolders by type, PDFs into documents, images into photos, spreadsheets into finance, and anything older than 6 months into the archive folder, show me as a summary of what we have moved. So here we have examples, and we're quite specific about the file organization system we wanted to use, right? You could also do it differently and say, please look over all of these files, suggest to me how you would organize these files, and then which files would go where, right? So you can also kind of what some people call reverse prompt. You could ask Cowork to do it for you and come up with how it would sort the files. Now, that's the really lazy approach, and honestly, I've done that at times, but maybe you already have a system, right? Then, of course, you could just tell that system to Claude Cowork and let it do it for you. There is a content-aware sort, right? So you can tell it and go through the PDF files in my folder, read each one, and sort them into subfolders based on their actual content, invoices into invoices, contracts into legal, manuals into reference. If you're unsure about it, put it in a review folder for me to check, right? That's another great prompt. You give it a system, you tell it explicitly to look at the content, and then you also create this review folder just in case it is unsure, and that way you make sure you avoid any miscategorizations that might cause you to overlook a file later and not find it. A third one for a weekly cleanup routine could be create a checklist document for a weekly file cleanup routine, include check downloads for new files, sort them by content, flag duplicates, move old files to archive, and list any files that need my attention, save it as a Word document. Now, here we're going to look at a checklist, right? Once again, we're quite explicit in how we wanted to sort things, and we also tell it to flag duplicates, move old files into archives, and also to create a list of files that we may need to look at manually. So all of those are very useful, right? And of course, you could combine them. So you could let it suggest a folder structure for you. You could let it execute them. And then you could ask it to write a Word document explaining the structure you have just created, or create a checklist, right? That might also be very useful. So just one more time to say this, Cowork reads file contents. It sorts by what's inside, not just the file name, right? And also, if you give it access to a folder, it will not only have access to the files in that folder, but to the subfolders and the files within those subfolders, right? But you could tell it explicitly if you just want to organize the files in that folder or also the files in the subfolders. All right. So much for that. In the next video, we're going to take a look at research and data workflows. See you there.